Oh yeah, we started Rolling Stones Records. Yeah, we decided to start Rolling Stones Records with Atlantic as the distributor. I was involved with the negotiation with that same lawyer, Prince Rupert, Alan Arrow, the Erdigans. They had a great Atlantic lawyer then too. It was interesting. The thing is, my big memory from the contract negotiation is, not stroking my own self, was I really was a record man. Ahmed wasn't. Ahmed was a great record person, but not a record man. We had a pressing plant, and I knew how much it cost, how to make a record, how much it cost. And that's how we got the largest $1 an album royalty, because they couldn't argue. Ahmed started sweating. That's all I knew. My dad taught me so many tricks about body English. Ahmed pulled that handkerchief out, and he started doing this on his bald head like that, and I knew I won. And we got the album deal. Mike Mayer was the lawyer. We got $1 an album with a big budget. And all Ahmed said, he called it, Marshall, all I want, get me a fucking album every 18 months from these motherfuckers. And I did. I did.
And those were seminal years, Exile on
Seminal
Main Street.
years, man. That was started out with Sticky Fingers. The first project I did was the last London Decca record called Get Your Ya-Ya's Out. And that was a great meeting when I met Sir Edward Lewis. We went to the board meeting because the Stones contract with London Decca they owned all the tracks recorded during their recording period, even if they hadn't heard them. In other words, that was the deal. So I had to get together all the tracks that were recorded and bring them to London Decca. Mick hated that. He just hated that. So while we were recording at the time Sticky Fingers, he recorded that track called Cocksucker Blues. Can I sing the lyric to you?
Yeah, sure.
I'm a stranger in town. Where can I get my cock sucked? Where can I get my ass fucked? I'm a stranger in town. So that was to shock the Decca people when we played it live for them. We gave them tunes, not every little morsel, but we gave them, it wasn't anything great that was in the can. And that cut was on it. I went there. I remember the English lawyer, Paddy Grafton Green. He's one of the biggest entertainment lawyers to this day in the UK. But yeah, so that's how that's what happened. We did Rolling Stones records. So we decided we wanted to sign artists on the label and give them their own imprint. So our next artist was going to be Jimi Hendrix, who we heard was available for outside the U.S. right before he died. I was driving. We were recording with our truck we were recording in Rotterdam, Holland, and I landed in Amsterdam, and I drove to Rotterdam. It's a couple of hours. It's an easy ride, and I was shocked because my neighborhood in Chicago was Shell Oil gas station, and it always had the yellow Shell with red letters, S-H-E-L-L. But it's the first time I noticed in Europe, because Shell's a Dutch company, I'm on a highway, there's a Shell gas station, but it doesn't have the letters. That's how popular, everyone knew that logo, that strong. That was my contribution to the tongue and lips. So that meeting, when we had our meeting about the label, I said, there's one thing. And I remembered all this because there's been a book written now about that logo. The guy, some real logo nerd wrote it. So I said, the only thing I can suggest is we come up with something that doesn't need type, that gets that recognizable. And they love that idea. And I think Mick or Charlie said, I think Charlie had gone to art school in London. Charlie said, I know someone that is John Pesh, the artist who I know that doing. And I guess they contacted him and told part of the idea was to have no type. And if you have old Rolling Stones vinyl, it does stay. We scribed it in along the edge, Rolling Stones record, like what would usually be printed. It was scribed into the vinyl. And that's how that began. The first album was with a Warhol cover, was Sticky Fingers with the zipper cover, and it became number one. And, every album I ever did was number one. And I had a great run. It was just a fabulous, fabulous run. They never once told me what to do because we had success. I traveled around the world, like, first class, private. It was a whole other lifestyle. And it was an amazing situation.
And talk a little bit about a figure who's also a little bit lost in history, but was such a seminal figure in all that. And that's Brian Jones.
Yeah, Brian Jones, probably, root seminal figure. I think a lot of it, believe it or not, the Stones will hear this, they'll hate me. My own psychological examination, Brian Jones had a love affair with a gorgeous, wonderful woman who died recently named Anita Pallenberg. Mm-hmm. She was a German actress. Her father was a Nazi captain or lieutenant in Italy, so she was raised in Italy. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Probably one of the sexiest women I've ever been within a foot of, and that was Brian Jones's close girlfriend. Brian Jones, she ran off Brian Jones and Keith went in Keith's Bentley, and they drove to the south of Spain and took a ferry across to Morocco, the three of them. Somewhere in the middle of the trip, they threw Brian out. She started fucking Keith, and Brian was such a sensitive, delicate soul. He was. I even just sensed that from him. He got blown away and he left. And Anita was to me, Anita was the big influence in the image and look. That Keith Richards look, that was the Anita influence. And I got to know that. I lived in their house with them. I lived on the top floor. So I got an intimate. So I think Anita Pallenbury and Brian Jones, the two of them, really laid the foundation for the Rolling Stones image and sound to begin. I think Keith did not really bloom till after Brian died. That's when Keith really bloomed, And then to me, which was the greatest as far as the music production end, is when they got Mick Taylor, because then you had this fabulous, it's similar to Brian. You had this amazing rhythm of Keith, brilliant rhythm playing. Rhythm guitar with the beautiful, delicate Les Paul guitar leads of Mick Taylor. And the interplay to me was my records with the Stones. The two of them were brilliant. Although I think Ronnie Wood is brilliant and deserves to be a Rolling Stone, he really plays Keith style. They're really similar players. They don't have, that delicate, that other sound. They somehow emulate it, but it wasn't the same once Mick Taylor and Brian Jones left. But yeah, then Brian, I think, he was just, we all were taking drugs in that era. He was very depressed. I mean, I've had a few sour love affairs. It hurts. And if you're weak and don't have help and you take drugs, and he had a swimming pool, where he could easily OD or whatever he did. I mean, there's people say I think he just OD'd in this swimming pool and died, but I don't know. No one really knows. Yeah, but he was a major, major influence. But then Keith and Mick really blossomed as a team, even though when they didn't really love each other. I went through that period. They both lived on Cheney Walk, a block apart. I was the only guy. I was friends with both Bianca and Anita. I was like the middleman. It was period of my time with the Stones where I was going back and forth, trying to make it all cohesive, and I did it well. So I was in the right place and right time for me. It was a great hot, amazing period. Unfortunately, losing Chess Records finally got to me when I experienced hard drugs the first time, and all of a sudden felt really good. I didn't know at that time that I had a whole well of pain in me from having my life's thing taken away from me, in a wisp, even though I was with the Rolling Stones. Only through years and years of work on myself did I realize that was what was, I had to get rid of that, deal with that. That was what drove my own drug situation. And then I became real close with both Mick and Keith. Bill Wyman they were having problems with him, personality problems, even though he was in the band and played in all the sessions. Keith would replace a lot of his parts after they were recorded. I was always in the middle of that, and then Bill would never mention it. It was a lot of interband, psychological things to deal with. But, like any band like that has that. I don't think it was anything special or different. I'm sure the Grateful Dead, Beatles, they all had that, Any kind of group of people for years and years that are together have those kind of things happen.
Amazing. And were you in the house in France when they did Exile on Main Street?
Of course. I was part of getting the house rented, building the mobile truck that we took down there. Phil and Elcott. Yeah, I was. I was definitely there. That's when I first got my first taste of hard drugs. They had a guy there from Marseille, it was when that remember the French Connection? That was all happening.
Sure.
Yeah. Mick had a great, I stayed at both, but Mick's house was Mozart's old house. Unbelievable. Up on the hills there in Cap Ferrat, France. Yeah, we made that album. It was amazing. I mean, I had to build a kitchen. The old mansions in France, had the kitchen in the basement with dumbwaiters to bring the food up to the millionaires. I had to rebuild a kitchen, hire a chef. We would all join for one meal a day. The chef would make in this long table, pass around bowls of pot and hash and eat, and then go to record all night, every night, all night. Different rooms in the basement with pipes and dampness. And Jimmy Miller was there, we had Andrew Johns, the engineer, both dead of drugs. I'm one of the survivors. Yeah, and that was amazing. And yeah, I stayed there the whole time. That was my life until I
Amazing.
finally left. I left because finally I realized that I was a heroin addict of a special type. I mean, I carried Narcan, which they now, for ODs. I mean, I had it way back then. I used to get methadone on the black market, and I had a pharmacist who would make me fake labels so I could travel without, look like tonic. I went through that horrible drug period, and one day I was in Montreux, Switzerland, where we were living. Keith was living in Switzerland. We were in Montreux, and I woke up in a hotel room, sick, drug sick. I had that bottle of methadone in my shaving kit, and I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror, and it's like it was an epiphany. I saw myself, how I looked. I mean, I was like, I saw it for the first time, and I quit that night. I had it's a funny story because I went that night. We were all together, and I said, "I've got to leave. I'm going to die. I can't. This is not me. I got to leave." I just knew I had to that morning. I knew it had ended. The relationship had to end for me to survive. It had nothing to do with them. They had nothing to do with my drug addiction. Yes, they exposed me to it. And if I hadn't known them, I would have probably needed a lot of psychiatry and maybe never, that was all part of my way out. I'm not against being a drug addict. It was a period of self-learning, and
Right.
kicking it was an amazing experience, like climbing Mount Everest. Many people told me I could never do it.
And all these years, Marshall, you're still here, still in music, and now you get to work with your son.
I get to work with my son, which is just thrilling. Third generation, pure record man. He did all the music for Narcos. I mean, he did Latino music. And even today, he's helping me with this KRS-One Big Joe Crash comic book because Disney owns it now to try to see if we can reestablish it. Yeah, it's the greatest. It's just the thrill. And I dragged, I did what I did with him like I did with my father did. He's been dragged around to recording sessions right from the beginning, all over. No, and then when he was in college, they had a studio there, and he discovered a kid from Italy, Jacopo, Italian rapper. And I said, record him. Let's record him. And I took him to Italy to teach him how hard it was to sell a project with his master. This was part of my education, just like what my dad did. I sort of replay that. We're in Milano, and the first label is we go to Universal, who owned the chess. Rap was just starting in Italy then, Italian rap. The Universal guy was a real asshole. I told him to his face because the way he talked to me about it, I said, "You don't know what the fuck is going on." I wanted to show my kid how to stand up for himself. These fucking executives. Second was BMG. Marshall, I love it. It's great, but BMG is it's being sold. It's not the time. Now he's all depressed. We go to Warner Italia next. Tino Silvestri. Commercial. He pulls out a grappa. We all have a shot, puts it on. I want to sign it. It's the greatest. We make a deal. In Italy, we record him in Firenze with strings from the local music school. And it wasn't a hit, Jacopo, but he had that experience. So he's in college. He puts there's a Japanese supermarket in New Jersey where all the Japanese go to buy the products from Japan. He puts something on their bulletin board about, you get a Japanese rapper, he gets a response. Onigashima, that's next, a young kid who's a Japanese rapper living in New Jersey. Father's a businessman. I make a deal with him. We have our own label called Big Cities in Tokyo. He sells it. They flip out for it in Japan. We record it. It wasn't a hit. That's fine. But we did it. He did it. He made a label deal in Japan. He came out. We went to Tokyo with me twice. And so he's our two internationals. And then when he graduated college, I brought him into the music publishing I was running at the time, Arc Music. And, he became a record man. I dragged him around, and he's still helping me to this day. I mean, he's better than I ever was at that age.
Fantastic.
It's an amazing, it's a thrilling thing to see. The thing is, there aren't record men anymore. That's the thing I tell him. I was showing him about this KRS-One, about all these things that are right out in people's, but there's no more. Record labels are departments, and they don't really think creatively from the one process to the end anymore. They think creatively, but in sections,
Yeah.
But again, I don't know. I have no idea. I made this new album. He told me to make the Virus Blues 17 minutes and make a video with it, which I have, because that's what YouTube likes. Right. They can play it.
Right,
I didn't even know I don't know about that, about streaming on YouTube. He's advising me now. He's my advisor.
Fantastic. So, Marshall, just to close, one of the things that you talked about in the early days of chess was nobody saw color. And I had Steve Cropper on, Great Minds.
Yeah.
We talked about, Booker T and the MGs, Duck Dunn, who I know
Yeah.
you work with, and
Right.
Al Jackson and Booker, two white, two black. And at Stax, they didn't see color either. Look at what's going on in America today with all of our challenges around race.
Woo!
What's your take on
Wow.
all that? Because it's such a tough time here
I,
in the
thi- I
States
you
now.
know, I think it's great. It's about time. I've been aware of systemic racism my whole life. I can remember Officer Berger coming in and said, I just killed this nigger and put a gun in his hand. I didn't want to bother with him. I remember that. Man, this is from 1960s. White cop, Jewish cop, Detective Berger, Sam Berger or something. I remember it. We had tons of it against my family, because of being white and dealing with black people. I just feel we are the problem. We have allowed bad education from slavery on. We've allowed bad health, bad diet. We've made it, as KRS would tell me years ago when I met him, we have a generation of insane youth. They're mentally ill. They kill each other for sneakers, to rob sneakers. They shoot. Look in Chicago. They shoot. We've made it. We have a mentally ill generation. So I'm horribly upset at the depth of how fucked up it is and how hard it's going to be to just get out of it. And the way Trump has inflamed it, has really upset me so much because it's such a hard climb. It's climbing Mount Everest for the black culture to come out of this. What did they do to Obama? Oh, he's black president. They took it. Look what they did. They took everything he did or tried to away from the man, His wife tried to change the diet. They dissed her, now that look what we got now, I mean, someone who tells you not to wear a mask. The road, it's such a steep climb. It's so ingrained in young white and young black people. And I don't want to use the word stupid. Oh God. They're like malnutritioned psychically due to us creating a system that caused it. And now we're complaining about it, I don't know. Yeah, there's going to be, I am afraid of race wars and all those things with the white militias. And how about the black militias that no one talks about? They're ready. The white start, there's a lot of guns. I could see a gang in Chicago. I could see war. I saw it in Chicago with Mother Cabrini riots. I was in Chicago, those civil riots. My final parting of racism. We had that WVON, Voices of the Negro radio station, millions of listeners. The riots in Chicago, the race riots at the Mother Cabrini. Mayor Daley, Richard, the old Mayor Daley, the old man, right? Calls up my father. My father calls me, Marshall, you won't believe it. Daley just called me. I said, well, what did he say? He said, Leonard, the niggers are on the warpath. Can you help me? End of set. That's what my father, Leonard, you want guards around your radio station? This is back in the 60s, man. It's now 40 years later and it's worse.
Yeah.
And back then the black, they just had knives. No one had guns,
Right.
So yeah, I'm very worried about the racism and I've often wanted to speak up, but I became good friends when I did that Scorsese film and we involved Chuck D, I got, Scorsese did that series, 7 films. Yeah, I heard 7 directors called The Blues. Mark Levin, this great documentary director in New York, called me up. I want to do Chess Records. Will you work with me? I said, yeah. I don't know what we're going to do it on, but I'll work with you. And just pure coincidence. A week later, I get an email. Mr. Chess, hi, my name is Chuck D. You may not know who I am. I'm the lead singer in a hip hop group called, I think he said rap group called Public Enemy. I want you to know I've been reading negative reports of your Electric Mud album. I want you to know that's one of the most sampled albums. It helped change hip hop. It turned us all on to the original black blues singers. Thank you. You're being dissed. And I couldn't believe it. So I emailed them back. Yeah, I know who you are. You don't have to tell me. Thank you so much. You made my day. So then I send that email to Mark Levin, the director. And I said, could this be a movie? Me introducing Chuck to the Chicago and the blues. He said, oh my God, that's it. So Chuck agreed. And I said, never met Chuck. And my uncle was in New York coming to visit. And he was already had a brain injury, but he was still my uncle, Uncle Phil, because we had the publishing together. He came with his son. I said to Chuck D, you come to Chicago, we're going to film Meeting for the first time. And we did. It's in the film. He came, and they had the camera set up. He met my uncle. And then I took him to Chicago and took him to Maxwell Street. And the old blues guys were still there tearing it down. Took him to Chess Records. He was so, he's really a blues, black music historian, fantastic. After going around Chicago, it was fantastic. And then I worked at Sugar Hill. the birth of hip hop.
Broken glass everywhere. People pissing on the stage, you know they just don't care. I can't take the smell, can't take the noise. Got no money to move out, I guess I got no choice. Rats in the front room, roaches in the back. Junkies in the alley with the baseball bat. I tried to get away, but I couldn't get far. Cause a man with a tow truck repossessed my car. Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
You know, The Message, Grandmaster Flash, White Lines. I was there for all that. And I did the record with Malcolm X's wife called No Sellout, the 12-inch. So I had to become partners with Betty Shabazz, who got burned up later. She said, I hate white people. She was a PR head of Medgar Evers University. And me and Keith LeBlanc, the drummer, after we made the record, we had to get it approved by the Muslim people in New York, that the lyric. I like Malcolm X because he changed, that it wasn't just black, it was everyone who he got the universality of humanity. I love that about him. We used that in the record called No Sellout. Black, white, red, doesn't matter. You know, that was a very good lyric. So I got to know Betty Shabazz. She told her, I hate white people, but we ended up, I had to take her to lunch with all her, she had these typical black hierarchy. She had all these secretaries that kissed her ass like she was Queen of Sheba, And I took them to the Chinese restaurant, me and Keith in Brooklyn, wherever that was. That was a classic. But yeah, I've been around with that part of it. I have been around a little.
Amazing. Well, Marshall, this was
anyway,
such a
man,
joy.
I'm glad I did it. It was.
Yeah.
It's like I had a great release. I told it. I haven't done this in a long time.
Well,
it was
great. And
good.
please
I feel really empty and I feel better now.
I'm glad you do. And please thank Jamar for me, and I'll stay in touch.
The foundation of rock and roll, blues, jazz, gospel, soul. See the faces that made Chess Records one of the most seminal record labels in the world in this fabulous new Chess tribute book, available on Amazon and other fine bookstores.